Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello, how are you on this fine, springy summer's day?
I am doing alright, thank you. I am fine. How are you?
I am I'm good because I've remembered, and those who've been listening to the last episode will know that I was trailing um a particular piece of information about songs from the 80s and the 90s that completely and utterly astounded me. And dear listener, what you can't see is that I'm currently holding up a copy of one of the one of the truly great British pop songs of the early 1980s. I don't think it gets quite enough attention, and it might be because the person behind it is a, shall we say, a character. It is the story of the blues part one, which is just a phenomenal pop song. Really awesome song. And if anything, if you listen to it, it's kind of got the wall of sound, Phil Spector vibes to it and its production, which is important because the song that you might be surprised to know that is produced by the same man, Mike Hedges, is McAlmont and Butler's Yes, which also has huge wall of sound feel to it as well.
Oh, it sure does.
Absolutely. I've got a funny feeling he also did one of the really big kind of post Ritchie Manic Street Preachers singles as well. Probably something like Everything Must Go, which would fit in. But I was just reading about because I think it's 20 years since Yes was released, and I was reading something about it a few months ago, and they put the name of the producer in, and I thought, oh, that sounds familiar, and then dug my 7-inch copy of The Story of the Blues out and thought, yep, that's the same man, all right. You figure it just sounds just so similar, almost as though Bernard Butler yeah, might have gone to him and said, we want you because I listened to The Story of the Blues when I was a kid. But I just find it interesting that I mean, they're 14 years apart and yet they sound just awesome pop songs were produced in a very, very similar way. So a little bit of a connection there. It might be a slightly Anglo-centric reference for all our Cambodian listeners, but you know, look it up. The internet is a wonderful thing.
That's how you expand your knowledge of music.
It is indeed. Yeah, yeah. Have you expanded your knowledge of music since we last spoke?
I've watched Man on the Run since we last spoke, the Wings
Okay.
documentary,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting, and also the documentary about the recovery of the lost Hofner bass as well. So that's kind of been my little Beatles fill-in since last we spoke. Both pretty much recommended. I really enjoyed both of them in very kind of different ways, but they're both really, really worth checking out. So, yeah, it was really interesting to see them. The Man on the Run documentary is mostly really good, but it does gloss over a few things, which is a little unfortunate. But
Such as?
well, there's like whole albums that basically I don't think Red Rose Speedway is mentioned once, and it's like not a good album, but doesn't deserve to be completely deleted from history. And some of the focus is a little shonky because of that. I think as it Wings, the Snow, London Town that was recorded in the yacht. And like McCartney offhandedly says, "Oh, I think that was the best Wings lineup that we had." And like, there's no follow up. Like, we don't like, okay, maybe we could go into that in a little bit more detail, Paul. And like, there's a little bit where you thought, you get a little bit, oh, like, it was a good bunch of lads, and like everybody was getting on, and it was a good vibe. And then it all falls apart again before Back to the Egg. But that kind of that little period could do with a lot more expansion. The film was already quite long, so like, I think if you were going to go into much more detail, it's going to become a mini series, not a film. So I do get it, but it's a really interesting watch nonetheless.
So do you maybe feel as though because of the position he's in with his career now that he's not going to get asked the tough follow-up questions?
I think so. I mean, it's been really interesting watching McCartney sort of reevaluate and reposition himself as this kind of grandee who is getting to the point where he is more open. You know, McCartney is kind of famous for not being open, for always having pat answers to everything, for not always,
Mm.
um, really being, it's one of the contrasts, classic contrasts between Lennon and McCartney. Like Lennon can't shut the fuck up about what he thinks, and McCartney always never says anything about what he thinks. And that is one of the stark contrasts between them. But McCartney is getting to that point in life where he is much more prepared to be open about certain things as he's been getting much older. That will have a very direct relevance to the song that we're discussing today a little bit later on. But I really like Old Man McCartney. I think he's great. I love the way that his voice sounds now. And I love the fact that he's being much more unguarded about the way he brings across his opinion of things. So it's not, it's the documentary Man on the Run isn't just a fluff piece. It's not just him saying, actually, Wings were great. Like, there is some of that in it. Of course there is. But, he's more open and more unguarded about the parts where he got something wrong, or he admits that he was overbearing, or he missed the point of what was going on, or he fucked something up, or whatever. Like, it is more in that direction. I think it could still have been a bit more, but he has asked a few questions, direct to his face, like, what the fuck was going on with this kind of thing? And
Okay.
it does work. He's still prepared to sit there and do it. Yeah, he could do with a few more slightly stronger follow-ups, but again, I don't know that it's hard to say because this isn't. It is a documentary. It's about documenting the facts of that 10-year period. It's not a deep psychological analysis of Paul McCartney and who he is as an individual. So there definitely is space for there to be more work done there. This documentary touches on it, but it also, you need a bit more. I have to also say that we're recording this episode before the release of The Boys of Dungeon Lane, McCartney, at the time of recording, McCartney's newest album, which I think is due out in about 2 or 3 weeks from now, something like that. The single's been released, but it's obviously very clear that there's going to be a lot of reflection and a lot of looking back at the past and discussing the past that comes up from that album. Can't say anything about that yet because it's not out yet. So yeah.
Yeah, due for release on 29th of May. Yeah, funny enough, I've recently been reading about the playthrough that he did at Abbey Road this week
Oh right.
to 50 competition winning fans, and it seems to be from reading about it, he was talking a lot about back in the day, and it does seem to be that he is evoking this period in his life. That sort of, yes, old man reflecting on, well, presumably the late 50s, I would guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is quite interesting. I mean, to the point where it looks like they decked out the studio at Abbey Road with lots of period specific pieces as well. I mean, I have heard the single, and it's okay.
Yeah, same here.
Um,
Same
you know,
same here, same here.
And actually, with interest, I noticed that the he's also going to be appearing on another record that's coming out soon, where he is playing on at least one song on the new Rolling Stones album.
Yes, indeed. Yes, Foreign Tongue.
Yeah, which will be interesting. They seem very, very pleased with themselves and the way that their albums turned out, which I'm not surprised given how gushing people were about their last one for reasons I hadn't quite worked out.
No, me neither. It's all right, but that's all it is.
Well, exactly, and I do think there is that potential to kind of laud people for longevity, but kudos for the longevity, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Speaking of longevity, hasn't Paul McCartney been smoking dope for a long time?
He does seem to have been smoking dope for a very long time, yes, up to and including, the writing of this song, which, for the sake of form, we'll say is obviously Got to Get You Into My Life. And yeah, that also, like, you saying that links back exactly to what I was talking about. Like, it took McCartney a long time to be upfront about the fact that this song was about cannabis rather than, another love song. It was in the 1997 book, many years from now, when he sort of came out and admitted it. And I mean, that's quite a long time ago from where we're sitting now in 2026, when we're recording this. But
Yeah.
it's still, it's the start of that process where he can afford to be a little bit more like his state. He's kind of his status is secure. Like he doesn't need to worry about how people are going to think about him. He doesn't need to worry about what it is. Like he's fucking Paul McCartney. It's fine, and
Yeah.
he's finally seems to realize that and be relaxed about it. And that's kind of wonderful. I'm really glad that he is. That kind of admission that this song is about pot is a really important thing because I think it's kind of the start of that process where he can come out and say, "Oh, actually, maybe I can be a bit more frank about this."
Okay, so before we get into that though, does it matter what it's about? Because I suspect that when we were listening to this as teenage boys, we may not have been aware of. I wasn't aware of what it was actually about because he's not exactly, he's not as blatant about it as George is about his dislike of Her Majesty's Treasury in the mid 60s. There is a sense of knowing kind of, ooh, it could be about this, but it could also be about this. And I think the song works lyrically on potentially on those different levels, but does it work as a song before we sort of worry about, does it work as an ode to dupe?
I think it does, and I think one of the things that's remarkable about that kind of revelation is that it really doesn't make any difference in terms of this song. I don't think it desperately affects anything about it. And in a way, that's quite an odd thing to say. Before we started recording, I was saying it's not like discovering 1 64 was about taking heroin. Like, that would change your interpretation of that song. This one, it kind of doesn't. Like, it's not a massive surprise to discover that it's about pots, but also it just doesn't really. I don't know. I can't say that it really made a big difference to me when I found out. Like, no, you're right. I definitely didn't know that was one potential reading when I was listening to it as a teenager.
Yeah.
But listening to it now in the full knowledge of that really, and it's also straight from the horse's mouth. One of the really interesting things is the McDonald book has quotes John Lennon in 1980 saying, "Oh, I think the song was about LSD," and McDonald says something about I can't remember what the exact quote is, but it seems really odd that Lennon would say that. And then, like a year or two after that, or a couple of years after that book was published, like McCartney comes out and says, well, actually, it was about pot. And presumably Lennon just misremembered which drug he was particularly choosing to evangelize at that particular point in his life. But it's kind of interesting that like there was a hint of it before, like sort of, from an actual Beatle, but it never quite seemed to be a valid interpretation. But now that McCartney has actually come out and sort of fessed up, it's obviously that's straight from the horse's mouth, but it just doesn't really, I don't think, matter that much. What do you reckon?
No, I don't think it matters at all. I mean, after all, the biggest selling single by the Stranglers is Golden Brown.
Yeah, well,
And I
exactly.
don't think it was bought by loads of people going, yes, finally, a song about heroin. Phew, what a relief.
Heroin and
Um,
harpsichord together at last.
and yeah, exactly. So it just happens to be a damn fine song, which apparently was covered by Alexander Armstrong in 2016, which for British listeners, they'll go, what, really? But everyone else will go, and yeah, so it kind of falls into that category, really. Does it work as a song? Well, yes, it does. And I think it works as a song precisely because at this point in the album, I do think we're after something a little bit different because we've had lots of things already and we're in the mood for something else again, and we get something else again. And the thing that I most remember from listening to this quite early on, particularly in the first, shall we say, two-thirds of the song, is how prominent in the mix the brass section is compared to any other instrumentation. Almost to the point where I seem to have this cultivated memory of thinking at some point that it was predominantly, if not almost exclusively for most of it, brass and McCartney. I mean, to an extent, it is that until we get to the outro, those are the key bits that really, really matter. Now I know there's bass in there, and I know that Ringo's doing Ringo things in the background as well. But it's all about the brass and the vocals until we get past the second chorus, I think.
I agree. I agree. I think the thing with the bass line here is that it's actually a very, very simple bass line. A lot of it is, particularly over the start of the verses, it's just a single note. It's not a complicated bass line at all. It's the vocal and yeah, the brass which really punch above their weight, which really pull this song together. There's different takes and different versions on both the Super Deluxe, Super Quantum Hyper Revolver and on Anthology 2. And they are revealing, at least in the sense that, without all that instrumentation, it is a relatively slight song. There's not necessarily an awful lot going on in it. Like in terms of the chords that are in it, you're up at about half a dozen. The structure is pretty verse chorusy, verse chorus. There's not a lot of variation there. There isn't like a big instrumental or a long guitar solo or anything like that in it. And that vocal and the brass is really what holds the entire song together. So yeah, they're absolutely crucial in that. It's interesting to note that again in the McDonald book, he seems unsure about whether Lennon is actually on this song at all. I'm not really sure where that doubt comes from. I think I'm correct in saying that he is listed as playing rhythm guitar in the Complete Beatles recording sessions, the Mark Lucian book. So I'm pretty confident he's on this. Okay, it's not the biggest contribution to the song, but I'm pretty sure all four of them are in there.
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, perhaps he's in there adding some texture to it. I don't
Yeah.
think it
Oh
was
yeah. Yeah.
necessarily, and because of course one of the contributions that he could have made in terms of the backing vocals, well, in some respects, the backing vocal in this is the brass. So, for example, when you get to the chorus and it's got to get you into my life, the response to that comes from the brass line rather than from any kind of call and response with the vocals.
But
And in
there
fact,
was a call and response on on the original sort of take. I think it's the one in Anthology too. It has McCartney delivering the "Got to Get You Into My Life," and then I think it's like somewhere somehow. So there was a call and response in there, and it's taken out.
And okay, there you go. Well, that was I'm going to put that as a tick for a prescient comment by me. Then there you go. Um,
Excellent.
but it does fill in, and I like the fact that they were confident enough. Bear in mind, this was the second song that they started on this album. They were confident enough to play around with something like that. Now, admittedly, they started it as the second song, but they came back to it at various points through May and June of '66. So clearly, thoughts on it changed and evolved. But I like the fact that they are thinking differently about it. And actually, it's quite then interesting. We'll obviously come to cover versions later to think that, of course, this is the version that we ended up with. And there were other versions, therefore, which might have used brass in a different way. But of course, the cover versions are covers of the released song rather than the one that the version that may have appeared elsewhere. So
Yeah, yeah.
you will get the ones that have the typical brass or typical arrangement in copy of what actually happened. I think the structure is quite interesting. The structure is worth coming back to because there is that bridge between the verse and the chorus, and it does do something different because you get that kind of descending line, repeated descending line in there, which is useful. So you've got three distinct sections, and McCartney can do three distinct things with his voice as well. So we set everything up, and in some respects, if we are going to think of this as predominantly a song about drugs, I find it really, really interesting that we get a build, we get excitement, we get the anticipation of, yay, this drug is wonderful, yay, this drug is amazing. And then we get to the point where it's got to get you into my life. And then rather than explode in terms of, some sort of musical representation of what it's like to take, let's say, marijuana, we just then go back to the beginning. It's almost like it's all tease, but there's no kind of revelation, at least for the first two thirds. It's just all about This drug's quite nice. I'm going to go get some drugs. I'm going to get some drugs. Oh, I'm going to get these drugs in my life. Oh, let's go back to the anticipation. It's kind of weird, but then I sort of, the more I listen to it, the more I think that that outro, that last third of the song, once the guitar kicks in, that then potentially could be symbolic of now I'm taking it, now something is happening.
I think that's
Um,
exactly what it is. I think that's exactly what even the fade out is almost kind of like being, like just getting a bit stoned and kind of like drifting off. But yeah, I think
yeah.
that's precisely what it is.
And then that, of course, links into Tomorrow Never Knows, which, yes, all right, fair enough. Tibetan Book of the Dead, blah blah blah. But if that's not drugs related, then frankly, we might as well just all give up and go home right now.
Well, we could do this for years. It's too late to give up on it. No, we can't possibly do that. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, and it is. I'm not going to linger in the lyrics too long, but I think they are relatively clever in the sense that it is obviously easy to interpret it as a love song, and presumably that's what most people have done over the years. But it works perfectly well if you hear and you go, oh yeah, well, actually it's about cannabis. Yep, that's fine. But it's a clever enough lyric that it easily holds both interpretations. But like we were saying earlier, it doesn't really matter which one like you take. It still works. It's not a wordy lyric. It's not a complicated lyric. But I do think it shows signs of being quite well put together, and I don't. I think that we smuggled a message in about drugs here. Like it's not that, and given that this is an album with both She Said She Said and Tomorrow Never Knows in it, like there's no secret about what's going on here. It's pretty upfront, and it's kind of interesting to have that kind of like subtextual interpretation of it, if that's not too pretentious a way of saying it.
It's quite
But
pretentious.
thank you very much. I do my best, and I think that it's yeah, I think it's a well put together lyric. It's not an all timer classic, but it's a really well constructed piece which allows a multiplicity of interpretations, and they both hold without one interpretation taking something away from the other one.
It's definitely hinting at becoming a very different songwriter on this album. If we
Yes.
bear in mind that we also have, Eleanor Rigby, where we have that kind of story um, going on in there as well, and we are moving into things that are more sophisticated, as Lennon would have spoken about at various points as well. So it is interesting then, and I do find that interesting because I don't think, whilst I'm not as critical of McCartney's lyrics, he'll be pleased to know, as Lennon is in some of his comments. I don't think of him as being a great thematic songwriter. I think, he can inhabit a character, he can write stories, some really kind of interesting stories. He can summon up pieces about individuals, and he can write kind of, generic love songs. He can write some amazing. I mean, maybe I'm amazed, for goodness sake. But but
'Cause you better not be
I
calling Maybe I'm Amazed generic.
no, 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 no. That's one of the more effective ones. But I don't. My knowledge of his post Beatles catalog isn't good enough to be able to say yes, he writes lots of songs about other things, that he is addressing issues. I think there are the ones that we are all aware of. For example, Give Ireland Back to the Irish, which actually I quite like.
Yeah, I quite like it as
It's,
well.
it's it's not a bad song at all. Lyrically, okay. We've got that great, hey, can't we all get along, everybody? Ebony and Ivory. Isn't that lovely? And that other great, can't we all get along? Pipes of Peace. But then I do wonder if Pipes of Peace is more known for its video than for anything else. And Ebony and Ivory is really more known for some of those cheesy lyrics than for it being a great issues piece. But I did kind of randomly rustle through a few of the song titles on some of his Wings and solo albums. Songs that I don't really know. And I was wondering whether Morse Moose and the Grey Goose was a song about animal conservation. Because
It's definitely not a song about animal
it
conservation.
could be. And I wondered if Temporary Secretary was a look at the trend in the late 70s, early 80s towards more temporary forms of employment, and that casual labour force that was really introduced by some of the reforms of the Thatcher government. Although, of course, I think it was released only a couple of years into Thatcher's government. Would I be close in either of those assumptions?
No, no, not for those songs. I don't think. It is an interesting side of McCartney because he doesn't tend to write a lot of songs about that. Although I think it's worth mentioning, just in passing, that we might be a bit sneering towards something like Ebony and Ivory, but it was controversial enough at the time that it got banned in South Africa. Now, okay, that's apartheid South Africa, clearly, but
Yeah,
nevertheless, it was banned there.
badge of honour.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not a bad thing. And it's kind of interesting the way, a lot of kind of it seems so hopelessly naive and sort of like you say, kind of cheesy now. But the conversation has moved on since what's 1982's Tug of War, right? So it's moved on since 1982.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of songs in McCartney's back catalogue that are kind of like issues based or about things, let's say. Now, I'll make a quick confession here. I know this is a little behind the curtains thing. You asked me to sort of have a look at this because I'm a bit more familiar with McCartney's
Yeah.
solo career than you are.
And I'm not expecting you to be a completist expert. I know you're not, but just when we first met, you certainly were much more invested in Wings, for example, than I'd ever been.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a definite cut-off point in my kind of like McCartney sort of fandom, which is Off the Ground, which is 1993. That was the last album I bought as one where I was like an ongoing fan. Like I bought Flowers in the Dirt in 1989. I was a big McCartney fan, and like you say, I was really into Wings as well. And Flowers in the Dirt was released in 1989 when I was still a schoolboy, and Off the Ground was released in 1993, which is just the year before I graduated. And in that small space of time, like my music taste changed beyond all recognition, as it does for most people when they go to university. But that's kind of where I stopped, and I have gone back and sort of dipped into some McCartney stuff. I really like New; it's a fantastic album. So there, are, like Chaos and Creation as well. There's like really good stuff in there, but I'm not a completist past that point. However, there are definitely songs, that are his attempts to be about something. From that album, from Off the Ground, there's Big Boys Bickering, which is a very political song. It's the one that famously has the line "fucking it up for everyone" in it. It's not often you get McCartney swearing in a song, but it's noticeable for
Oh,
that. You
okay.
have Angry on Press to Play, which is about his absolute fury at his treatment of the press. Long Leather Coat is about animal rights. Looking for Changes, despite repeated warnings, which is about the environmental catastrophe. And of course, there are a few songs about drugs, but most obviously, let's say "Let Me Roll It" and "Hi Hi Hi." However, did he manage to encode that secret message? There are songs out there. Looking for Changes as well. I must mention for looking for Changes as well. So they are there, but it's not a significant part of his writing. I'm sure there are other examples. There's probably many examples that I've missed. Like I said, after a certain point, I'm definitely not a completist. And
Yeah.
if anybody else wants to write in and tell us what the songs that I've missed out are, then that's fine as well. Please do. We'd
Yeah,
love to
I
hear
was
from
just
you.
Flowers in the Dirt was the last one that I bought. And I remember listening to it a couple of years ago and thinking, oh my God, this was really overrated at the time. But just looking down there, because I sort of was going to jokingly mention, oh, that song about cars. It's Motor of Love, which is the last one. But actually looking down the song titles, I'm reminded that How Many People was a song about an environmentalist who was killed in Brazil, I think.
Yes.
Um, but I don't remember it as being a very good song.
No, well, the one that I should also mention as well, because it's the one that sticks out most obviously from early McCartney's solo career, is "Too Many People" from Ram, which is the one that got up John Lennon's nose so much he wrote "How Do You Sleep"
Okay.
as a response to it. That's very clearly about something. Whether you want to believe it's completely about Lennon or not, maybe, but it's certainly about, the sanctimony of some people who think they have a right to kind of lecture you and tell you what to think and feel. So yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention "Too Many People" as well.
I think it's worth revisiting something that we have discussed on a previous episode, in the sense that the most important thing when it comes to a really memorable song, I, well, the two most important things I would say is obviously that, the melody and then the performance. I think that the lyrics are, as long as the words fit, that's the most important thing. I wonder, and I've kind of posited this before, and not really spent that much time thinking about it. Are there any great lyrics that are in bad songs? And do they ever get remembered? And I suspect that if there are great lyrics in bad songs, they're not remembered because nobody listens to it because it's a bad song. So, you can be a great lyrical writer, but if nobody's listening to you, what's the point? You're doing some self-expression. It's a bit like doing some, A-level English homework. It's nice that you've written it, you got it off your chest. But outside of your teacher, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. I'm now desperately trying to think of really bad songs which have got really great lines in them. I'm not coming up with
Yeah.
anything off the. I didn't get the opportunity to prep for that question, so
No, 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 no.
unfortunately, I've
That's
stranded
fine. That's
myself a
fine.
bit there. But yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, if nobody's listening, what difference does it make? Like, you need to find both the ability to communicate your good lyrics, but you need to be able to do it in a song that people actually want to listen to or dance to or play or cover or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, yeah.
You won't be very pleased to know that when you do search for what are some bad songs with great lyrics, there's a Reddit thread, but there's only two responses, one of which says every song by They Might Be Giants.
Well, and yeah, that's I would take some issue with that. Yes.
So yeah, anyway, that's something. Now that I've started searching for that, I will carry on looking for that, but obviously
Yeah,
not during this recording.
there's a
So
rabbit hole to fall down.
no, that's fair enough. Have you got anything that you would else that you'd like to add before we get on to talking about what other people have done with the song?
No, I don't think so. I do. This is going to sound more summary than I kind of mean it to, but I do really, really like this song. I just kind of I realize I haven't particularly given my opinion of it so far.
Mm.
I think it's great. I think it's a really, really good song, and it's the jolt of energy I think the second side of the album kind of needs at this point. It's been I think Side 2 Revolver is really, really fascinating. But this is just like a straightforward bolt of energy. It's not the sophistication of "I Want to Tell You." It's not the subversion of Dr. Robert. It's not the sort of austere melancholy of For No One, and it's certainly not what's coming next week. It's just this great jolt of energy, and
Yeah.
it certainly feels more straightforward, I think, than I Want to Tell You, and I think it probably is. But I don't mean that in any kind of pejorative way. I just think this is a really great song. It's precisely what the album needs at this stage, and I think it's kind of fascinating that it was recorded so early in the album's construction.
Yeah, and this might be recency bias, but at the moment my view is that when that guitar chimes in
Mm.
after the second chorus, I think it's the cleanest and best guitar line on the album. I just
I
think
kind of agree with you, and that's George. It's not Paul. It's really
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, yeah. It's a fantastic piece of work.
it is such an interesting way to then end the song as well. That outro I think is pure class. And again they're just doing something different. They're wasting the most interesting part of the song as it fades out, and I love the ballsy nature of that. It's so confident to be able to say, "Yep, we're that good. we can basically fade out while all of this is going on, and we don't care. But then we know what's coming, and what's coming is potentially even better.
Well, time will tell. It always does. But yeah, no, I think that's about all I have to say. Is there anything else you want to say about it before we move on to what other people have done with it?
No, no, I want to praise you for that wonderful cliche. That was quite something. Very, very commercial radio.
Thank you. I'm glad you think so. It is, in fact, a line from the Seventh Doctor, as spoken by Sylvester McCoy. But yeah, of course, I was slipping a Doctor Who reference there. Why wouldn't
Wow,
I?
even better than commercial radio.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Episode
Right.
4. Remembrance of the Daleks. Very final line spoken in that episode. Moving on.
Moving on very quickly. So, yeah, JG, cover versions of this. I'm just gonna start. I have listed the Earth, Wind and Fire one, but I'll let you talk about that in a minute. I'm just gonna stick up for stick up for and also be slightly surprised by the cover that actually was released as a single in '66 itself,
Hmm.
which is Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers, which is a really good version of the song, albeit it is an almost identical version of the song, which is really, really weird, bearing in mind it's produced by Paul McCartney. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. I didn't until I started reading about them, and I find them really, really interesting because they contain two-thirds of the famous duo Chaz and Dave, and that's an interesting point in and of itself. Um, you just to sort of remember that there's this musical heritage in a lot of the session musicians of the day, because Chaz Hodges basically was a session musician. He did end up in some bands like, the Rebel Rousers and then a few others as well. But the musical lineage is really quite impressive. And dear listener, how much I enjoy making links between this and this and surprising. Also, I don't know whether he was on that recording, but Nicky Hopkins was in the Rebel Rousers at one point as well. And it's fine. There's a good version from I think a German TV show of them playing it live, which is pretty impressive. It's got the brass, all of those bits are in the right place, and it's all done really really well. And I have to say, Cliff Bennett then looks around, see if anyone's listening. He's a better singer than McCartney.
Ooh, that's an interesting take. I'm not sure I'm going to go along with that, but he's a good singer. Like, he's got an amazing voice. No doubt about that.
Well, I think McCartney reaches for some of these lines, as he tends to do when he puts on his screaming voice. So when he does "Got to Get You Into My Life," he reaches for those notes. They're not quite there, and we'll come on to that when we talk about Helter Skelter, for example. He reaches for those loud, screamy voices, and that works for some people. It doesn't work for me quite as much. Whereas Cliff Bennett, I think, is much more certain about hitting those notes at that volume, and that does make a difference.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm going to pull you up on one small thing. You said Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers contains two-thirds of Chaz and Dave. I think what you mean is two-thirds of the Rebel Rousers are Chaz and Dave? You can't have
No,
two-thirds
no,
of
no, no,
Chaz
no,
and Dave. Or are there three people in Chaz and Dave and I'm misunderstanding?
no. See, now before we started, I told you to look out for a joke that I was going to insert when talking about Cliff Rebel and Cliff Bennett
We
and the
found the
Rebel
joke.
Rousers. So the joke is that it contains two-thirds of the famous duo Chaz and Dave. That's the joke because
I consider myself pulled up.
no, it's fine. It's Chaz Hodges and the drummer Mick Burt, who was always played with Chaz and Dave, was always on stage with Chaz and Dave, but of course Chaz and Dave is famously a duo, but there was three of them. So yes, two-thirds of the famous duo. That was my one joke of the day.
Good, excellent, fantastic. I'm glad I fell into your trap. Earth, Wind and Fire then. Oh my God. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So I must admit, I didn't know what to expect from the Earth, Wind and Fire version before I listened to it. In truth, I don't really know that much about Earth, Wind and Fire anyway, other than as a name. Like, oh yeah, well, like you've heard of them. They're like a band. I can't say I've ever consciously sought out their music. And given that their music is essentially disco, there's a very good reason why I wouldn't be doing that. However, I don't think I was quite prepared for how buttock-clenchingly bad that cover version is. Now, to give them their credit, such as it is, it is at the very least not just replicating what's on Revolver. It's not just like a straight cover version. It's definitely doing something different. So, as we always say when it comes to cover versions, that's good. Nothing else about it is, oh dear, it's awful.
I described it to you as odd, and that is as far as I'm prepared to go. I think Earth, Wind and Fire and not a band I have listened to very much. I agree with you. They're not a band I know that much about, but they are a phenomenally important band in the 70s.
Oh
And
yeah,
not just in
absolutely.
terms of disco, but also in terms of the progressive movement as well. They are really incredibly highly regarded by a lot of people. So I would like to disassociate myself from any remarks made by JG in an effort not to get utterly cancelled.
I still
Um,
listen. Maybe the rest of the back catalog is amazing. I still think that cover version is shit, and I stand by that.
okay, that's perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. I mean, it is worth pointing out that you will be aware of the work of one of the members of Earth, Wind and Fire, um, from the 1980s number one hit for Phil Collins with Philip Bailey, Easy Lover. And Philip Bailey was in Earth, Wind and Fire for a time, but I don't know how long he was in there for. But I do know he was in Earth, Wind and Fire. But there you go. And if I was to follow up on my Chaz and Dave joke, I would say I'm not sure if he was Earth, Wind, or Fire, but we're not going to do that because that would be disrespectful. So yeah, so a little bit of homework is to listen to some Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Good. On the three name thing as well, there's also the Blood, Sweat and Tears version, which I do actually quite like. It is pretty similar to the Beatles version. There's not a lot of radical reinterpretation going on there, but I quite like it. It's got a bit of energy, it's got some fire to it, and it's got a pretty convincing vocal as well. It's not astounding or revelatory in any particular way, but I do really like it. It really works for me.
So would you be interested in knowing that in the 1970s, Cliff Bennett turned down the position of lead vocalist in Blood, Sweat and Tears?
Yeah, everything it all goes around, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah. Whether that was before or after they'd recorded "Got to Get You Into My Life," I don't know. But maybe he just thought, "Oh God, I don't want to sing that again."
Fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough. The only other
yeah.
cover version I really want to touch on is the Ella Fitzgerald one, which is
Okay.
is very similar to the Beatles arrangement. It's fine. It's Ella Fitzgerald singing a Paul McCartney song. Like you can't go that far wrong. It's a pretty good version, but it's also pretty straight down the line. But yeah, there's a lot of good fun in there. It's a little bit more syncopated, as you might imagine from somebody like Ella Fitzgerald. But yeah, if not a complicated rearrangement of the song, it's a pretty good interpretation of it nonetheless.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely. And it will be interesting then when we get onto the final song on the album to see if anyone has even attempted to do anything with Tomorrow Never Knows. I'm almost painfully looking forward to looking up some cover versions of that. Um, yeah, I think that's going to be almost as much fun as investigating Earth, Wind and Fire's back catalogue.
Well,
Oh, hello. Phil Collins has a song called Tomorrow Never Knows. Please let that be the a cover of the Beatles.
oh,
Please.
oh, he doesn't, does he?
Oh, God, man, I hope so. That's
Okay,
what I'm doing
well,
straight after this.
yeah, we're gonna find
Uh,
out the truth about that.
yeah, and slightly. Oh, no. That's fine. No, that's not going to be. I'm. Forget I even went any. Oh, stereo MCs. Oh my God! Listen, you can tell
Stop
that
it. You can't.
my
This.
attention is gone now. 8 out of
Okay.
10. 8
8
out of
out of
10.
10. All right, thank you. Yeah, we can't fall down this rabbit hole today. That's for our future selves.
There's a Beat Bugs version.
That I want to hear. All right, good. I'm going to give it 8.5 out of 10, and I am also going to leave it there. Any final comments?
No.
Good. you can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. Please do. Any of those McCartney songs that I missed off the list or anything else you want to talk to us about, it would be lovely to hear from you. You can email us at BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com, and we are BeatlesStuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, where I talk about music and films and books and TV shows and whatever takes my fancy. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, it's time to wrap this album up with Tomorrow Never Knows. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.